All right. Today I'll talk about my, I guess, recent obsession, which is learning languages. Surprisingly, um, I don't know. I just wanted to kind of record something. Today is the. I mean, I'll get into all of this later on, but today is the last day of my kimchi reader subscription. It actually just expired, and I just dropped another 100 or so on it for the next year. Keep myself motivated. But yeah, since I've been on it for a couple of weeks now, uh, and again I'll explain what it is in a bit. I thought today would be a pretty good time to record something like this to kind of commemorate the things I've done with it and kind of see where I am now. I know some people do updates like this monthly. I don't know if I'll be able to, or I'll probably just do it whenever I feel like it. This would be around the fourth month. So I started learning Korean I think this was like November 9th of last year. Just like from scratch, like Hangul and everything. I think yeah, overall it's been really interesting. And yeah, I just have some stuff to talk about. Um, yeah, so let's see. I didn't mean to have this open, but that doesn't matter now. A little spoiler, if you will. Yeah. Uh, so basically, I just wanted to go over a couple of things. Kind of starting small with stuff that I don't really do, and then going more into stuff that I do a lot more frequently. And then I also just wanted to talk a little bit about my thoughts on language learning and things like that. So let's start with reading. Reading, I didn't do much of really. Just if you guys know Darquan, there's a set of graded readers. Graded readers are basically readers that have been graded. They're readers that have a grade assigned to them. They're readers that have some, difficulty assigned to them so that people who are reading them will be able to know what they're getting into. So yeah, I mean, there's a website. I forgot what it was, but you could probably find it easily if you look it up. I think it's like Learn Natively or something like that. That has a list of graded readers, and reading is something I really mean to get into, but just really haven't had the will. And I'll talk about it a bit later too. But I've been doing a lot of sentence mining, and I really like sentence mining with audio. So if you kind of take sentences just as they are plain text from the book, even if you have, the pop up dictionary and everything, it'll still be kind of tricky because I don't know, it just feels less immersive. I don't have someone reading it to me. Maybe I'll figure out some way to like hook up an AI narrator or whatever. But yeah, so these are pretty much like sorry, getting off a cold. These are pretty much just the most basic Darkwan readers. I think they're graded for A1, A2, so really low level stuff. And since I was able to understand a lot of it, and also because, books have a vastly different vocabulary set and sometimes much more advanced vocabulary set, the fact that I was able to understand a good amount of these means that they're indeed very easy. So, highly recommend. I mean, they were engaging enough to where my brain didn't just shut off, and I felt like I was reading a kid. I mean, it is a kid's book, but it was fun. I think it's okay. So yeah, that was. I do intend to maybe go more on the Learn Natively website. Find some more books, but I feel that to really read effectively, I want to have a larger vocabulary set because, for example, I could show you like I'm reading this book, and when you see this much orange and red effectively on this pop-up dictionary, means orange means I've seen the word, but I'm not sure what it is. Like for example, like gamansek, like I mean, I know it's black, but it's just like I don't use it in like a daily, in a daily basis, so I wouldn't be able to recall it very easily. All the words that don't have underlines are words that are like really easy for me to recall. So for example, like this for face, like it's something that I would be able to use in a conversation. But yeah, so when you do see this amount of red and orange, it can be a bit intimidating and discouraging at times because these are all kind of your shortcomings, kind of staring you in the face. So here, especially, it's hard because even a sentence like this, I have to get through three underlines, right? And some of these I recognize, but like this, I mean, I just want to know what this is, right? And then so I would take this and I would mine it. And I don't have a mine card for this, obviously. But it also, there's no translation, which honestly, I probably don't need a translation most of the time, but it helps to have. So some of these times I'm reading and I just kind of get lost and there's no translation to steer me back on track. And I guess, being lost is part of the learning process, but being, kind of lost in the weeds, trying to dig yourself out of some grammatical hole is not really my cup of tea, honestly. I might just be lazy. But yeah, so, this stuff is kind of what I've been intending to read. And apparently, this is supposed to be a beginner's book. Like, hell, you have like pictures like these, it's like knockoff Studio Ghibli. So it's maybe once I learn a couple thousand more words, I can come back to this. Anyway, yeah, so that's reading. Writing practice. I mean, output practice wise, I just haven't really done much of, and especially I consider output mostly to be speaking. Speaking as the output, I definitely care a lot more about, because I guess mostly of what I want to engage in would be speaking related, like conversing, and also, maybe like online through like, comment sections, chat rooms, things like that. That could be fun. So having that speaking style is much more important to me than being able to write. And honestly, writing might be better for me as a learner with Chinese heritage because when you do write in Korean, they tend to use hanja a lot more. But to be honest, I just don't really have any reason to write. I'm not taking tests or whatever. I'm not, going through like actual schooling, writing essays, things like that. So as long as I can talk, and since it's also an alphabet system, kind of different from Chinese, as long as I can talk, I feel like I'd be happy with that. So writing, not much other than just, purely grammatical sentence making practice. I think AI is a great tool for this. So, you could just get Gemini or ChatGPT to generate practice sentences in English with the grammatical point that you want to practice, and then you can just translate those sentences, or maybe even just make up some sentences of your own and get the AI to correct you. So it's good for that kind of short, quick feedback loop practice, but it's hard because, as I'll talk about it a bit more later, but I guess the hardest part is actually be able to transcribe that to like an actual conversation, right? So that's really tough to like know, especially with lesser known grammatical forms, or sorry, lesser used grammatical forms. Sometimes it's kind of unnatural to just like bring it up in a conversation, right? So achieving that naturalness is something that'll probably only take time. Yeah. So yeah, that's writing. Same with speaking. Speaking pretty much, as you can see, just talking to myself, pretty much. That's what this means. Or at least I hope this is what this means. I didn't consult the dictionary. But yeah, so just talking to myself, trying to like pick some conversations or like some basic topics that I would be able to use my limited vocabulary set on. So this often ends up just being the same topics over and over, which makes it quite frustrating. And so this is honestly why I haven't taken italki lessons that much. Like I tried one lesson, but this was, probably almost 2 months ago, and I had a much smaller vocabulary set, maybe a month and a half or so ago. So it was honestly at some points it was like hard to understand the teacher. I think I would be a lot better now. Like my vocabulary size has grown a lot since then. But even now, it would be pretty tough because I feel like we would just be talking about the same stuff over and over again, and I wouldn't even sometimes really even be able to kind of describe what I want to talk about, let alone talk about it. So in that case, I've kind of just decided on trying to grow my vocab set because I feel like vocab is underrated in terms of it being a limiting factor. People I see online all the time are always complaining about the difficulty of Korean grammar, and while it's difficult, to me vocab is just a complete slog. Like grammar at least has some flexibility to it, which gives it some like interest. But vocab is just like, well, if you don't know it, you're screwed, right? So what can you do? So yeah, trying to increase that vocab set so that if I'm able to go on italki, I can perhaps hold a decently length conversation. And also, there's just so much work that you can do on your own in terms of speaking practice. And my pronunciation is not perfect, but I would say I'm getting a lot better at it. And it's something that, since I'm immersing with native content, I'm able to kind of pick up on, a lot of the mistakes that I make in terms of pronunciation. And also, like, sometimes I use, or like, words come out of my mouth and they just sound wrong, right? Because I've heard similar things through, like, listening based immersion. So yeah, I think once I get a little bit more of that sense, and once I could, comfortably talk to myself in Korean, maybe, or maybe not comfortably, but I could, hold an extended conversation with myself, or, be able to like accurately describe a somewhat interesting topic or topic in depth, then at that point, maybe I'll try talking again. So yeah, that's my thoughts on speaking. And so now on to listening. Listening. Let me check how long I've been going. Okay, all right, not bad. Okay, listening was, I mean, this is really what got me into learning Korean, right? Was music, and I think like music is still one of the biggest drivers for me to learn this language, is because even when I go back and I listen to a couple of the songs that I first heard 3 or 4 months ago, and I didn't know any Korean. I like now I could finally like understand. I could pick up some stuff. I could pick up on grammar forms. Is just I think a lot more unique to me than just picking up a vocab. But I could also pick up a vocab. So yeah, I think that's been extremely rewarding, and it's something that like definitely keeps me going a lot of the times. So yeah, so I think I use music in particular. I don't really listen to a lot of like older stuff, and I know like people do recommend it. But to me, like since like IU is a modern like ballad composer, and I think I mean I really like that genre. And there's a lot of like really unique like words that you could get out of it, and also kind of unique grammar points too, that you don't really see. But in my opinion, like after I learned them, I'm like, oh, this is really poetic. Uh, and if you put it together with kind of the verbiage as used, it lends itself to a very like polished poetic feel that I mean you don't get from just like the standard pop groups, right? Um, so not that I don't like them, but I think this type of like ballad music where kind of the lyrics tell a story. It's something I really enjoy in English music too, and Chinese music. Like I think Chinese music, since it's so ballad oriented, it's a lot of the lyrics are really, they have a lot of like uniqueness and depth to them. Um, and this is kind of just a trend across like Mando pop music and Canto pop music in general. So maybe I kind of lean that way due to my heritage, but I think, even in English music, I tend to lean away from, like pop music with just, standard lyrics, right? More towards like slower moving music with kind of like meaning put into it. So yeah, being like sort of deciphering it almost as a puzzle is something that's really interesting. So yeah, highly recommend, especially with some of the grammar forms that she uses. Like it's always a motivation for me to learn more grammar, which is getting harder and harder, honestly. Um, yeah. So again, before I kind of talk about the rest of listing, I have to talk a bit about Kimchi Reader. It's basically like, I don't know, um, like the other, I forgot what the other ones are. Like Migaku is one. There's some other like sentence mining like pop-up dictionary platforms. But the cool thing about Computer is basically you're able to like go on YouTube, right? And then you're able to just like go on any like random video and have like a pop-up dictionary with it. So I don't know, let me, like DD's Korean podcast, like for example. Um, you can, I don't know, I'll pick a random one, but DD has good subtitles, right? So you could turn off the, oh, no, no, I will later. So there we go. So there's DD. And then if you parse it, like you can see here, like this is like the pop-up dictionary. And fortunately, since this is our introduction, I know all of the words, so you don't really see underlines. But let me probably, if I skip to like any random sentence in the middle, oh, hey, it's not bad, There we go. Yeah, this is more representative of my actual skill. So, if look at this, right? So I think this is poet, and this is something actually I could decipher with Hanja, like Shirin, right? So this is a word I don't know in Korean. So as you can see, similarly to earlier, it has the red underline, and the orange underlines are words that I've seen before or I've mined before, like chokida. I think this is one word that I've mined before, right? So if I hover over it, like you can see, I've mined it once. But yeah, so so as I'm kind of doing all of this, I can pretty much just, if I just click mine here, like it'll just it, it'll just like record the entire. I don't know how loud that is actually. Um, or I don't know if it actually has volume at all. But basically, it'll record like the entire clip, and it'll like mine it, put it together with like a photo. If you want a photo, it'll put it together with the subtitles, like the secondary language subtitles, which is generally English for the translation. It'll have Hanja. Um, like here, if I click on it, like to give it the definition, it'll have Hanja, it'll have the pronunciation, especially with sound changes and batsim, it can be pretty tricky. But yeah, so, and you could even like use the Korean translation, but I'm not nearly good enough for that. I prefer having a translation I can read easily. So yeah, so then after you click my sentence, it'll basically upload it into your Anki deck. You can sync it to Anki, and then you can just use it with Anki. So that's like really really good, you know. Um, so that's really really nice. So I've been using this for a while. So here we're back to the book, but if you could kind of take a look at this, like this is how much I've mined, right? So, well, no, not this. So I've mined like 543 cards. Just sometimes repeated, but most of the times they're unique. So a tad over 500 new words. And then this all gets uploaded in my Anki deck, which I kind of do on a daily basis to keep that up, right? So this it's been really helpful to have something like this, and it makes immersion a lot easier, and it makes learning vocab a lot easier because there's kind of this thing about I+1 sentences, right? Which is you want to mine sentences, mining as in extracting the sentence out of context. You want to mine sentences that have one missing word from your vocabulary. So those are basically I+1 sentences, and those are generally the ones that are most beneficial because you have the most context to infer from. So here, having I pretty much only mine I+1 sentences, and they've definitely grown my vocab by quite a bit. And this is only over the course of a little over 5 weeks, a month and a week. So yeah, I mean, this is why I kind of repurchased the subscription is because obviously I doubt I would keep this pace up, just but if I do keep this pace up, it's like that's like about 5,000 mind words a year. So yeah, I mean that's nothing to scoff at, right? So hopefully, I just spent some money on the subscription earlier. If I can get a couple thousand words out of this, then it's obviously worth it. Language learning is already a cheap enough hobby as is, right? So yeah, highly recommend Kimchi Reader as a tool. There are some kind of shortcomings with it, and it's not necessarily faults of the app, but also faults of my own like learning style and my own thought process. So I'll kind of talk about that in a sec. Okay, so yeah, so podcasts without scripts, not subtitles, scripts. So these are podcasts that are more kind of free flowing. So I pick up a lot of kind of just like natural Korean out of these. And I think it's very, good to have like things like this that you constantly listen to because you really do pick up on a lot of expressions that you wouldn't just pick up on if you were listening to like a grammar lesson or a lesson with that's scripted, right? Because for example, the way that I'm talking right now in English is nowhere close to the way I would be talking if I wrote a script for this. If I wrote a script for this, I would sound a lot more formal, a lot more robotic. I would be using, more complicated vocab. I wouldn't have interjections like right, things like that. So the style, I guess, is very different, and it's nice to have these, which is why I've kind of separated them. Podcasts without scripts, I guess, that's the best part about them, right? And also, since they're able to talk freely, they cover ground in a more natural way. So when you're listening to them, it feels more like a thought process. And so it doesn't feel like kind of that robotic nature. You don't really feel that compared to podcasts with scripts. But the shortcoming of them is that it's much harder to mine sentences because the concentration of known words is so much higher. And since at least in Korean, something I've noticed, and I don't know if this is true, a lot of my assumptions might not be true given that I'm still very much a beginner in the language. I think Korean tends to have a lot of filler grammar compared to other languages. In English, you just have filler sounds, but you don't really have filler grammar. Like if I'm struggling to say something, I'll just make a sound, right? Or I'll just say a word or two. But I think a lot of grammar in Korean can sometimes lend itself to becoming kind of just like grammar that's just for the sake of filling time. So that makes mining a lot harder because you have a lot more of these phrases, and so the words that you actually don't know are spread further and further apart. And also, just by the nature of there not being a script, the the person will stutter more, right? The speaker will stutter more. The speaker will kind of go all over the place more. The speaker will stick to easier vocab because easier vocab is by definition easier to use. And so it's kind of harder to pick up on a lot of the I+1 sentences that I need to really craft, a good Anki deck. But yeah, I mean, a couple of podcasts I do want to shout out here. The podcast is absolutely amazing. Obviously, like that's probably the number one like Korean learner podcast there is, right? And something I'm really happy about with the DD podcast is if you do go to the DD podcast like main page, DD, let's see, DD podcast, like she has this episode about how to use podcasts to learn Korean, and I actually listened to it recently, Well, first I listened to it a long time ago, back in early January, and I recall the feeling that every language learner goes through, which is when you're able to understand just about nothing of what the speaker is saying, right? It's obviously an incredibly unfun experience, and it was I just remember like staring at the subtitles and being like, how am I ever supposed to get to this point? And the irony was that it was a podcast. The podcast was about how to learn through podcasts, and I felt like I wasn't learning. But I just went back and rewatched it recently, obviously with subtitles turned on. Well, not English subtitles, but Korean subtitles. And I realized I was able to understand a good amount of it. So I think I've been able to pick up on learner podcasts kind of patterns of speech and the types of grammar that they use. Um, and that's, you know, been of a lot of like mental help to me. I'm like, oh, I'm actually making progress. And sometimes, this type of stuff where it's very, incremental progress, it makes it hard to see. So yeah, that was one thing. All Things Korean is cool too. It's just a cool podcast. They have some conversation based stuff, which is nice. But conversation based stuff is obviously even worse for sentence mining when people are talking over each other, laughing and things like that. You generally just want one speaker at a time so that it's not, you know, I just have high quality standards for my cards, I guess. Half and Half is also by Taewoong Sam also. Um, that was just like half English, half Korean. Taewoong Sim speaks in Korean, and the guest speaks in English. And I think that podcast. I mean, I listened to a couple episodes a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was really interesting. And recently I've been like finding a lack of content that I can understand and just like listen to whenever I have nothing to do, but I can't really like sentence mine. Like if I'm away from my computer, just like walking to and from work and things like that. I could listen to stuff like Half and Half, right? Which it's because no matter what, with Half and Half, you'll always understand at least half the conversation, and you'll always have an idea. You'll always have a finger on the pulse of the conversation, right? You'll never really completely get like you never completely get derailed, which is sometimes when I listen to purely Korean podcasts, sometimes you realize you've been listening for 2 minutes and you can't say talk about anything that they just said, right? So that's been really interesting. It was a really interesting podcast, and it's something that I kind of intend on getting back to. And I guess one podcast I didn't mention on here is the TTMIK podcast. That one's also pretty nice. Um, yeah, I mean, I just think that dialogue based podcasts are things that are good to listen to, not necessarily mine with. So that's something I intend to listen to a lot more. And my comprehension for that podcast is like maybe 60%, give or take. And obviously it's not good, but I realized my comprehension for it comes in blocks. So sometimes they say talk for, like I said, like a couple of minutes, and I have no idea what's going on, and sometimes they talk for a couple of minutes and I understand 90% of it. So I think that type of listening would help, because with comprehensible input, obviously you're supposed to aim for a very high level of base understanding. So yeah, I think I'll probably keep listening to that. Give Half and Half a shot again. Podcasts with scripts are ones that I try to mine with. Tresusu is definitely the best one. But I don't know. Her intermediate podcast, I realized because I was listening to it, right, and she talks at a honestly quite a brisk pace, in my opinion, for just an intermediate podcast, and she uses some pretty complex grammar sometimes. Like sometimes it's I feel I mean I know a couple hundred grammar points by now, and she's still surprising me. And I feel like my vocab is what's holding me back from truly reaching intermediate status, not my grammar. So yeah, I have a feeling that her intermediate podcast is slightly harder than advertised, but um, I but like I was listening to it, and sometimes I was just like walking to and from work, and I realized when I realized that I couldn't understand a lot of it, it was kind of disappointing. But I sort of realized that these kinds of podcasts with scripts are ones that you should be sentence mining with, right? So honestly, the more unknown words, the better, as long as they're I plus one sentences. And I think Tresusu's episodes, especially the intermediate episodes recently, have a ton of I plus one sentences that I can mine with. And the grammar is interesting enough to keep me interested. So I've kind of shifted my mindset from, oh, I need to use this as comprehensible input to understand 95% of it in order for it to be a good experience. I've shifted from that mindset to more of a, oh, as long as there's enough I plus one sentences, even if I don't understand one word per sentence, it's fine, right? And same with Cajun to an extent. Although I think with Cajun, her vocab is so dense and complex to the point where I don't often even get I plus one sentences to mine with. Um, so yeah, that's kind of even less fun in that sense. But her content's really interesting. Like some of the stuff that she talks about is very much aligned with like what I want to listen to. Right, I'd like to. I don't because all of the kind of the beginner career podcasts and things like that, comprehensible input, are either about like really trivial stuff, like oh, I go to the grocery store and I bought this, right? That's like one branch, or oh, I went hiking and here are the things I saw, which of course I have no interest in. And the other thing I've kind of been losing interest in over time is just all they talk about is Korean culture, which is like I think the culture is interesting, but they can only talk about it so far with the limited set of vocab that they have. And so at some point, it's just like, well, I've heard this repeated multiple times, right? Oh, there's these seasons, or there's, these seasonal like fruits, or, during the holidays, like what do we do? And also, I know a lot of this, being from an East Asian household, right? Like a lot of this is not, news to me. So it's I would rather if they were to talk about it, they would talk about it more in depth. But obviously, I'm not at that level, so this is kind of the plateau that I need to slog through, right? And kind of a stage that every language learner kind of goes through. Yeah, so Juno Opa and some other miscellaneous podcasts that I found online are also good. Like, there's honestly a lot of people who have like tried creating podcasts and who have like given up, or just like it like never took off, so it never really pops up in your YouTube recommendations. So I think Juno is definitely one of them. Like he has a ton of episodes and there's a lot of like interesting concepts, and he has a lot of interesting topics to talk about. Um, the big problem with sentence mining here is that he doesn't have subtitles, right? But I found a way around that, which is pretty much just downloading the audio and uploading it to Whisper to transcribe. Um, so Whisper basically is like OpenAI's transcript like voice transcription AI agent, or not even agent, just AI. It honestly outputs like really high quality like subtitles. So so if you go to like videos on Kimchi Reader, you can upload a video and you can upload the subtitle file. And I wish I could show you, I honestly should have prepped this earlier, but I don't want to show off my whole file system. So you'll just have to take my word for it that if you were to upload the video and the subtitles, you get a very similar experience to YouTube. So yeah, and getting subtitles per video is like 15 cents, for like a 10-minute video. So it's like super worth it. And you can mine so many things out of these types of podcasts, right? Because the script is high quality, the audio is high quality. It's just that they didn't go as far as to include subtitles, but they're still high quality learning materials, and they have helped me a lot. Um, so yeah, that's been something. So I was honestly a fun little experiment on the side, just like vibe coding a script to do that, to do like the whisper transcription. So yeah, podcast with scripts. In terms of content, content is something I have a love hate relationship with, because content is something I enjoy watching the most, and it's obviously on top of music, it's what got me into wanting to learn the language, is just to watch content without subtitles. Um, And so I've kind of structured a lot of my learning around that too, which is like it's been very input heavy and listening heavy, right? Which kind of aligns with my goals. But every time I sort of watch these, I'm reminded of how far I have to go, which is always a kind of a humbling experience, right? The more you think you know, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. So yeah, shows and variety shows like I think variety shows are hard because they tend to talk really fast. I've been watching like some like slower paced shows like like guest house stuff or whatever, it's just like travel stuff where they don't really talk fast. There's like especially a lot of times if they have like good subtitles, and the subtitles are in like a standardized font. A lot of the times that helps me too because I think hard subtitles in a lot of Korean variety. I don't know about this in English because honestly I do not watch English variety. Like it just doesn't I don't know, it doesn't appeal to me. But in Korean variety, like they have like colorful subtitles in all different types of fonts like everywhere, and half the time it's like scribbled, and half the time it pops up for half a second. So it's kind of hard for me, like I can't read that fast yet, right? Even though it's an alphabet, it's supposed to be easy to read. It's still, it's still symbols and stuff compared to English, which it's slightly different, right? So yeah, so it's been hard to consume. In terms of dramas, like there's been a couple of dramas I've been wanting to watch. Like mostly rom-com stuff, which is like probably the easiest stuff to understand. Just like slice of life too also works. Um, but yeah, I mean, my comprehension is like not high enough. They still speak too fast for me, and I kind of want to save them for a point where I feel like I would be able to engage more with them, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of where I've gotten with content, and I've been able to understand actually good amounts of like really easy like interview shows, or things like that. Especially with Kimchi Reader turned on, and I think it's like half a cheat because like Kimchi Reader's word underlining, especially the yellow word underlining that tells you that you've seen the word before, that's been feeling almost like a cheat code, right? Because like sometimes I just like straight up won't recognize a word, but then I see it and I'm like, oh, I've like seen this, and I get that confirmation, and then suddenly it pops into my head that you know maybe I should just like go about life thinking that I know every word. Right? Because the instant that I realize I've seen the word or I know the word, it comes to mind. Um, I think that was anyway, that was a really interesting experience. So yeah, maybe eventually I should practice turning off the subtitles, especially the kimchi reader subtitles. But as long as I can, I want to keep mining, and mining is a lot easier when you can see the underlines. So yeah. Okay, great. That was listening. Now on to grammar and vocab. So let me take a sip of water. Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts about this type of stuff. Um, how I feel about learning grammatical structures at this level. So now I know a lot of the most commonly used grammatical structures. So even if you were to throw me into a native conversation, it just like if you just like extracted, all of the grammar used in a native conversation and gave it to me, I probably know almost all of it. Um, Definitely like at least 80% of it, right? 80-90% of it. But that remaining 10-20% is the really hard part because you just do not get enough exposure to that type of stuff without really actively searching for it, right? So, for example, one, like grammatical structure I've seen pop up a lot recently is like tero, like according to or as is. And that one is just I thought it was a really interesting grammar structure when I learned it, but outside of a couple of key phrases like maumdero, 생각대로, I'm not able to really find like examples of when they would use this. And since I'm not able to find examples of when they use this, when they do use it, I don't pick up on it a lot of the time, especially when I'm just doing listening practice. And so Yeah, as you can see, it's not necessarily a negative reinforcement cycle, but it keeps it hard for me to kind of master that grammar form, right? And there's grammar forms that just like pop up out of nowhere, and not that I need to know everything, but the learning grammar is like getting more and more frustrating now because of the amount of like normal grammar that I know. Oh, for example, another good example is like 쉽다, like like ga 쉽다, like that form, or you know just like any form any with 쉽다 that's not called 쉽다. Yeah, I just like do not get enough exposure, and so I don't. I'm not able to pick up on the nuance. And the only way I've really found around that is just Google as many like explanations about the grammar form as I can, because the explanations always end up coming with practice sentences, and so I get like two or three or three to four sentences like every time. They give me like a couple of sentences, and that's all I can really get. Otherwise, I have to go dig them out in the wild. So yeah, and a couple of specific grammar forms that I want to complain about right now. And I'll probably and these aren't even like the uncommon grammar forms that I mentioned earlier, right? It's just like it's like there's a lot of grammar forms that are like purely based on vibes. It's not like something that's like easy to understand, and it's something that you can use like very systematically, like hada, right? Or like harka, like a verb ending, or or even just something as or like daga, right? Like for interruption, or like while. Like this type of stuff, that type of stuff is like something that has not much, you know, there's not much vibes associated with it. You just use it because it's the correct thing to use, right? There's nothing else to substitute. But like stuff like taga 보니까, taga 보면, 거나서, 가지고, like types of um, these types of grammar forms to me are just so annoying because I hear them often, and I've watched so many videos, but it's just like hard to pick up on. And I feel like especially something like 가지고 to me is probably just something I'll have to pick up over time, because it seems like one of those like almost interjectory grammar forms that's used like more so even than it having a like a really unique meaning, right? But things like taga bonica, for example, it's like something I've tried to wrap my head around for a couple of weeks now, and I hear it in like Tresusu's episodes. I hear it in TD's episodes, and I just feel like the usage they use it with, it's so different from what I learned in the video. It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, as you keep doing something, you realize, but then they have it in some like tense I don't understand, or they use it in some a way I don't. I just like can't pick up on it. It doesn't. It's very different from the if you keep doing you realize form that I'm expecting, right? So yeah, I think it'll just come with time. It'll just come with time. It's just something I specifically wanted to complain about. And yeah, the other thing, just an interesting thing I've noticed, and this is like definitely nothing new, but I just realized how like backwards everything is in Korean grammar. Like literally, like the entire structure is backwards, and this is really what made like one of my this is what really made one of my first like Korean lessons on italki like really awkward. Because she was like, "Oh, why are you studying Korean?" And then I wanted to say like, "Oh, I'm studying Korean because I like the language," or something like that, right? But then I started saying like 저는 한국어를 공부하고 있어서, or something, but like it doesn't make sense, right? You have to like have the reason like coming first. Um, you know, 너무 재미있으니까, right? And then 너무 재미있어서, and then finish it off. Or maybe I don't have enough of a mastery of the language to realize like when I can use English like word arrangements compared to Korean word arrangements, but everything just seems like rather backwards. And honestly, after I realized that, it's made thinking about the language a lot easier, because like I just take my sentence and just like it's not just like subject object verb, like I like obviously subject comes first, but then like everything after the subject, like I just like I, and then like if I want to say a sentence like I and then something 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 with an object and a verb and a couple of like prepositions and things like that. I just like take everything and like reverse the order, and it like and then within that do some like micro rearrangements to make it fit the grammar. And to me that has actually like made me like a little bit better at thinking about the language. So yeah, just a kind of interesting thing I found. Vocab. I put sentence mining here again. I'm not sure why, but obviously sentence mining is of the biggest help. Honestly, here instead of sentence mining, I probably should have just like put Anki, because like Anki is something that I've been like grinding pretty hard. Let me see if I can, maybe I can pull it up. Yeah, yeah. So I have a ton of decks, but I'm not using a lot of these decks. Like there's like some decks like comprehensible input, like vocab decks, like music decks and things like that. Like vocab decks from back when I was taking the Billy Go like intro class. Like that these decks are not really decks that I use. I pretty much on a daily basis do three decks. I do the retro. I think it's retro like Korean 500. It's based off the TTMIK 500. And this deck I'm like pretty much like through. I mean I am through, but it's like it's like 96.6% mature, right? So this deck is almost through. I just like do it because the time commitment is so short. Like today, how much time did I spend on this? I spent 30 seconds on this today, 10 cards, right? So I just but this is great deck obviously for beginners. And then I do this Evita like vocab deck, and honestly this deck is not great. It's very much just like a simple like, oh, front is Korean, back is English type of deck. And uh, I like, I mean I like I don't even like doing this deck. And the problem is that like there's a lot of cards that don't have audio. At the beginning there were a lot of cards with audio, but then I think he got lazy or he got something else to do and then he just stopped adding audio. And then yeah, so the other issue I guess is that like the ordering of the words is like really interesting. Like sometimes he'll there the creator of the deck will just like throw in some landmark and soul or some random like I don't need to know what beef noodle soup is, for example. Like that's not really something I really want to learn. Maybe actually, that might just be me. Maybe someone's traveling to Korea soon and they really want to order beef noodle soup, but that's not for me. And so I expected it would be based off of some frequency list or something. Honestly, that might be better. But the deck is good enough to the point where like I do pick up words off of it. And again, the time commitment is not huge. Like I just have average. I have like this many reviews every day, right? Like daily, there's like 55 reviews a day or something. I don't know what this actually means, but yeah, as you can see, the commitment's not high, like 9-10 minutes or so, just around 10 minutes a day. So yeah, I mean it's pretty chill. This is just like a pure vocab deck. But the most important deck, obviously, is um the kimchi deck. Kimchi reader. I think maybe I need a sync actually. Sync today's right. The kimchi reader deck. These are like all the sentences mined. And so like the reviews are obviously even less, but this takes a good amount of time. Like it takes like 20-25 minutes a day. I just like do it whenever I have time. I have all the cards I've mined earlier. I have in this deck, with the exception of a few suspensions. So yeah, as you can see, like I've been very consistent doing this deck. Haven't missed a day since I got Kimchi Reader. And yeah, I mean, I think this deck has helped me the most. It just takes a lot of time, and I'm trying to be very liberal with my mining in the sense that I just try to mine anything I see, right? So I'm not like being too picky with the types of words I mine or trying to think about how much I would actually use it. So I've kind of set a rule for myself that if I do know the word, and I'm able to use it in conversation, I can let it go past like 1.5 months. But if I don't know the word and I don't feel comfortable, I would be able to pick it up or use it in conversation. I just like cap it under 1.5 months. So in the future, when the when that kind of time period rolls around, I'm gonna have like a ton of reviews, and this deck might end up taking too much time, and I'll have to revise my studying plan. But for now, it's a great deck for now. Okay, that is Anki. I wanted to talk about Hanja. So I don't know if you saw earlier, but like even in the Anki, in my Anki deck, I have a Hanja deck. And as you can see, I went through like 95 Hanja and I just like gave up. It's like I just didn't feel like doing it anymore. There's too many cards and reviewing them is kind of weird because like I feel like I should be suspending a lot of them, but I also don't, and I really don't want to like review simple Hanja cards that I already know from Chinese. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think Hanja obviously is like super useful for me. I'm able to, as you just saw earlier, I'm able to guess the meanings of words. I'm able to remember them easier. And I think obviously it's like underrated, even if you're not like a native Chinese speaker or like a Chinese speaker at all. Like having kind of rules for vocab is something that's really useful. I feel like I apply something very similar in English, like which is like Latin roots and just roots, I guess, in general from other languages. And so obviously, I feel like English speakers, if they want to achieve fluency or mastery of the language, they probably would have seen or would want to see Latin roots at some point. So for me, Hanja seems very similar, right? For example, and also I guess the one thing is that it makes like I don't know if you could count it as a grammar point or a vocab point, but like words with like jok, it's just like cane jok, like that type of stuff just makes it easier. Like I could use it like as I would use it in Chinese, like cane jokoro. I can use it, 比个人的, right? Like I can use that the same way I would use it in Chinese, which obviously makes it a little easier, right? Because I can that's like one less thing I have to think about when making sentences, and even like words like pionida, like the verb ending, not verb like sentence ending, I guess. Like that type of stuff is some stuff that comes really naturally to me that has nuance and might not be the easiest for everybody because of having that type of Chinese speaker, like, oh, I'm on the side of, I feel like that's not something that we say too much in English, but in Chinese I feel like it's more so, so it translates very well to Korean. Okay, miscellaneous thoughts. um Grammar is fake, and I mean, I don't obviously think this. Like, obviously, like, I don't think this is like actually true, but I think it's true to some extent in the sense that one thing I've noticed while learning this language is like how much of the structures I'm just repeating based off of what I've heard. Because sometimes I say it and I realize like the only reason I said it this way is because I heard it this way, right? And I guess the fact that like, and I mean, there's probably some thought experiments about this, but like if you were to really like exist in a vacuum and the amount of like experiences is limited, because language is really just a way to describe experience, right? And if you have a limited set of experience, then like and the language stops evolving, then every kind of permutation of your words, right, would at my disconnected there. um So yeah, I mean, at that point, I don't know. I don't know how much of that was actually caught in the audio recording as my audio cut off. But yeah, to that extent, I'll just reiterate again. If you were to live in a vacuum and you exhaust the space of possible experience, and so you kind of exhaust all the permutations of ways to form language, then I don't know. I feel like at some point grammar becomes kind of non-existent. All that really exists is vocabulary because you just, or maybe not even vocabulary, you just hear things said over and over again, right? Like, since everybody has lived like, some like that experience before you, you just hear it said and you reiterate it at some point, right? Like you're just outputting what you've been inputted. And so to that extent, I feel like obviously that's not going to ever happen. Like we don't live in said vacuum, but I think it's true to some extent in the sense that I output a lot of what I hear, and even a lot more than I would expect, to be honest. Um, so yeah, I mean, I just think you know grammar. I feel like it's just an accelerator for me learning the language. But obviously, babies are able to pick up a full language without ever understanding the grammar. So yeah. Taking Korean in school, just want to talk a bit about this. I mean, I'm thinking about it, taking it as a class, but I don't know. It kind of takes the fun out of it in my experience. Feel like there will be too much stuff that I don't want to do, especially writing. Like I really don't want to do writing. I don't think it's interesting. Um, I think like there's kind of too many risks to where that it'll just like kill my interest in the language. And I think I can get very far by myself and also eventually with italki. I think italki lessons are nice because it's just like so you're committing to a teacher that you like, and private lessons have always worked much better for me, always. Um, so so yeah, I mean, maybe I'll think about that. But one thing I do want to maybe try doing is like go to like Seoul for a summer, or part of a summer and just like do language school. I think that would be fun. And there were like study abroad programs in my freshman year, specific summers. But I mean, I didn't participate, and maybe now is the chance. Unfortunately, it would have to most likely be on my own dime unless I take Korean school. I would be eligible for some scholarships, but if I don't do so, it would be on my own dime. But I think it would be worth it. Um, I think it would be something that would really kickstart, or maybe not even jumpstart, because I mean, I'm already at a certain level, but it would really boost my Korean level to the next level, right? So I think that would be cool. And yeah, just quickly, I don't know, where do I want to go with this? Don't know. Just don't know. I don't know why I'm doing this too much. Originally it was for music. Originally it was to consume content. For right now, I think honestly people don't believe me as much, but the grammar of Korean to me is just so fascinating. I think grammar. I mean, I love learning rules, right? Like I mean, I do study CS, so having rules for language is something that is not an unfamiliar concept to me. But I have because English is such a like a fluid language without so many rules, or maybe too many rules if you think about all the exceptions. Um, and same with Chinese, right? Just not so many rules. Having such a strict language with rules, with social caste. Well, not caste. Caste is a horribly connotated word, but with social hierarchy, and with just like a built-in respect system, built-in system for how you're supposed to talk to different people, and also just like the almost like technical like puzzle like fitting aspect of. Okay. My mic is actually spazzing out now. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So I think that's like really interesting to me. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I want to go with this. Is just like keep my interest up in the language. Maybe eventually consume content. It'll be something. It'll be like a party trick to show off, I guess. Eventually, and learning a language is better than scrolling. I can my Anki time at least replaces some scrolling time. Um, so yeah, I think overall, it's been fun. I can't believe I've talked for an hour. about this. I expected this actually to only go 20 minutes, but here we are. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, I can do another one of these episodes, and I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Thank you. Bye.